Is that? There you go. So again, if you're interested in those assessment opportunities and would like to help out WIDA, please do so. All right. The next thing that I wanted to share is the requirements regarding parent notifications. So we have non-regulatory guidance from the Department of Education, and this is a link. And on page 29, it tells you what those requirements are. You can have 30 days after assessments are completed to notify parents, is basically what that says. But we've had a lot of questions lately and from districts and from parents even who said that they didn't know that their child was going to be in a program until their child came home and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to this class." So we need to make sure that we're getting that guidance sent out to parents. Also, you should be receiving your alternate access scores tomorrow. Those are due to be sent out tomorrow sometime. They were delayed because of standard settings, but they should be out. And as far as I have heard, they are on target. So those should be in your inboxes tomorrow. Just a few other things. I'm not going to read through all of these, but this comes from a letter from our our National Secretary of Education, Cardova. He sent out this letter with some new updates from the Office of OELA and from US Ed. I just wanted to share those with you so you could look through those. Some of them are very good. This one about mental health and emotional well-being was very nice. And then at the bottom, I've gotten a lot of questions in the last couple of weeks about identifying and screening English learners with disabilities. So I wanted to make you aware of this document that was updated and put on the website last year. I worked in collaboration with our Office of Special Education to create this document. The compliance officer for special education worked with me to verify that everything is correct. And they were very pleased with the finished document, enough so that they also included it on the special education webpage. So please check that out. It tells you a little bit about what you can do to screen English learners with disabilities and how you can qualify them or evaluate them if they can't take all 4 domains. So please take a look at that if that's of interest. And then, as I said, the webpage hasn't been updated. I shared this last month, but I wanted to share it again. These are your dates for the access assessments for this year. So you have those available to you. Some events that we have coming up here in Missouri. This coming week, we have in Springfield a conference with the Southwest Mill. You can find out more and register there. We have an interface conference coming up in Tantera on September 27th through October 1st. There will be some EL components in that if you're interested in science and math. We have a facilitated webinar series, a 2-part series with, this one is October 9th in Kansas City. Dr. Izquierdo is coming and doing a workshop, and I believe registration for that has closed. Guadalupe is here. Guadalupe, is it closed or is it still going on?
We're leaving it open for this week. We had a lot of people requesting it. So if
Okay.
you guys want to register, we still have a couple days more.
All right. So you can still register for that if you are interested, and there is a link there. Then October 7th and 21st, there's a 2-part WIDA-sponsored, free to anyone in Missouri webinar series, 2-part series on when language and disability meet, supporting multilingual learners who are dually identified. And I met with the facilitator today. They're going to talk mostly about how to identify the student and how to serve the student, talking about collaboration and what that should look like in our schools. So if you're interested in that, you have until I think October 1st to register for that, and you register on the curriculum calendar with this link. And then October 28th and 29th is an in-person WIDA workshop, again, free to any Missouri educator. It will be in Columbia at the Moornet Center, and it is on writing with multilingual learners in the elementary grades. This has always been one of my very favorite workshops that they put on. It is a 2-day workshop in person. You have to be there both days, but it's very well done. Again, it's one of my favorites. They have another that is for the upper grades, but it's basically the same content. So even if you are 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you could still attend this. It's the same information, just they're using a different resource. So that's available. And again, you register for that through the curriculum calendar at that link. Federal Programs Conference is coming up in November. Then in February, again in Kansas City, we have Boosting Achievement, her brand new book by Carol Salva. So she's updated the second version, and you can register to attend that if you're interested through the link there. The EL conference in Springfield will be having Andrea Hollingsfield as our keynote in March. So wonderful opportunity there. And I will have to put the link. I didn't have it when I created this slide, but I will put that link in our note taker. And then Elevate will be June 3rd and 4th at Fort Zumwalt West High School for this coming year. And when that link is available, we'll be sharing that out. All right, so those are just some of the events available to you in the coming months. You also have an opportunity through Show Me Multiliteracy. I know I've heard a lot of people asking about how do we get some certification, some training, some resources. Show Me Multiliteracy has mini grants that they offer to any school that wants to apply for them. They'll give you $1,300 to create something for your classroom to use or your school to use. You just have to write a mini grant, ask them for money to support something that you have in mind, and get approval, and they will set you up. So that's worth checking out and looking at. There is a link. You can get there through showmemultiliteracy.net, I think it is. And then they also have Teams USA. So if you're interested in having professional development for your school, this is a school-based Teams professional development course that lasts the year. So what they do is they come in 3 hours per month and do professional development with you, go over some skills that would help you work with English language learners. So if you're a small rural school and don't have a teacher, this would be a great opportunity for classroom teachers to learn more about how to work with English language learners. They have some stipulations on who needs to be participants in their school-based professional development, but you can find out more and how to apply through the link there at the bottom. All right. Then the rest of our check-ins for this year, we will not have a check-in in October because of the 2 workshops that we will be facilitating along with WIDA. So we won't have a check-in in October. November, we're going to be talking about newcomers and SLIFE or SIFE. January, program and LAU plan review. February, ELs with disabilities, to go further with that. March, we're going to talk about how to work with those higher intermediate ELs, some that are almost proficient, or some that are kind of stuck in being long-term English learners. So we'll delve into that a little bit in March. In April, family engagement, and then in May, we'll do our annual access growth evaluation and discussion. All right, and please don't forget about the self-paced learning. I mentioned that a while ago. These are the two new ones. We have pre-K through third grade essential actions and promoting success through strengthening practice. Those are two new offerings, but these are available to anyone in Missouri that is an educator. All they have to do is ask for access to the secure portal, which gets them into the Canvas platform. So if you have a math teacher, you could have a professional development day or have them set in on the math for language users. There's one for science. There's another one for social studies, one for long term. So any of these can be used by any teacher in your district, any educator in your district that's interested. So please take advantage of those. It's something I pay for through the state. And this flyer will give you more information about each of those if you need some more information. And they're at your own pace. You can get credit for professional learning credit for completing them. And they're very rewarding and very informative. So please take advantage. All right, something else I wanted to share with everyone. We've gotten the same way you get your student reports and your district reporting, I get a report for the state. And so I looked at the numbers, and that's what's here on the right. So this is a count of all of the students who took the assessment this year. So you can see that third grade and below, we have our greatest numbers. And when we get up to 11th and 12th grade, they start to dwindle a little bit, less than half of what we have in the lower grades. That kind of gives you an idea of the breakdown in our demographics of our students across the state. So this is the state as a whole and how many students at each grade level. We still have a few students in these lower grades that for some reason took an off-level test. So that prompts me to tell you, when you do these tests, be really careful when you're signing the students in that they're on the right test, because we are still dealing with some of those that are off level a little bit. The other thing I wanted to point out is the growth from last year to the previous year. So in 2023, we had almost 37,000 students. This last year, we had almost 41,000 students. So we are growing rapidly in Missouri. And I shared that last month that I had approved 120 newcomer screener kits. I've approved another 120 since last month. So we're at 240 brand new to the country, non-English speaking students that they were seeking approval for the newcomer kits. And if you're not aware of what the newcomer kit is, if you have a student who enrolls in your school who is brand new to the United States, has been here 4 months or less, you can fill out the newcomer kit in lieu of giving them the screener if they have no English skills. So we don't put them through the screener if they don't have any English at all, and they've been here less than 4 months. The other thing that I have here is that we have students in 291 of our 554 districts now. So more and more districts that haven't had students now have their first students. So we are expanding and growing in Missouri. All right, into what we're going to talk about today. Data for decision making and our portfolios. So I have a little video here that I want to share that is by Will Smith, and I think it kind of sums up kind of what our message is today. So one of the things he said is that before anyone else believes in your goals, the first step is for you to believe in them. They won't go anywhere if you're not connected to them and don't see their importance. We've heard this probably since we were young, but it's true. So I'm going to play this. It's just a couple of minutes, clip of part of this clip. So let's see here.
One summer, his dad tore down a brick wall on the front of his business and told 12-year-old Will and his 9-year-old brother to rebuild it. The job, they said, was impossible. It took them a year and a half, but they did it.
And he said, now don't you ever tell me it's something that you can't do. You don't try to build a wall. You don't set out to build a wall. You don't say, I'm going to build the biggest, baddest, greatest wall that's ever been built. You don't start there. You say, I'm going to lay this brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. Yeah. And you do that every single day. And soon you have a wall. Soon you have a wall.
So that's kind of how we are. We want to start one brick at a time. We can't do it all at once, but know by the time we finish, we should have a finished product. But it takes time, and we can't do it all in 1 year, I think is kind of what the message that I want that to share with us, is that we have to take it one step at a time and know that it's a process. All right. Oops.
Once
Get the next screen. There we go. All right. So using your score report, access scores give us the foundation where we can conference with other teachers, with students, with parents. So use those reports rather than just getting the final score that tells you whether or not they still qualify or whether they've moved up a level. Use them to talk about goals with your students. So that should be your first step. There is a great resource here called the Access for EL's Interpretive Guide and Score Reports that comes from WIDA. I encourage you to look at that when you're looking at your score reports. It kind of breaks it down and tells you the meaning of each part and what it could be used for. So that's a great resource. Also, using your can-do descriptors, they are included in that resource I just spoke about from WIDA, but by themselves, there's something you can sit down with students and talk about where they are and what they can do and what our next goals are. Another thing we want to make sure we do is look at scale scores when we're talking about growth. When we're just looking at the proficiency levels, we don't always get the complete picture of where a student is, but scale scores are consistent across grade levels within each domain, and they'll tell you how much growth the student has made over the year. So I encourage you to look at the scale scores when you're talking about growth. And then looking at the composite scores, they give you a different combination that helps you understand language. They summarize things, but it's really important to look at those individual domains when you're looking at what the student's needs are. And I broke down what our composite scores are made up of down here below. So taking all of that into account and thinking about what the information you're looking at and why you're looking at it as you're evaluating the students. Another thing is that it should not be the only thing we look at. So we don't want to base everything just on the access scores. It's just one test at one point in time. And we know that the students have different things that happen over the summer, for example, that might make them regress a little bit, or if they had opportunities, went to summer school, maybe they improved over the summer. So we need to keep gathering data from different sources, not just our access test. So some other recommendations from WIDA are to make sure you build relationships with students and your families. Knowing your students is one of the very most important things that you need. Also focusing on the assets and making sure that you're looking at the appropriate grade level resources and supports for your students. And then collaboration is one of the best things that we can do to support our students. And WIDA put out a focus bulletin that is specifically about collaborating and working together to improve instruction for our English learners. So that's available to you as well. All right, portfolios. So we have two different kinds of portfolios. We have the traditional papers that we hand to the teachers. I know when over 20 years ago, when I first started doing ESL, I had a folder for each of my students. And when they went to the next grade, I had a copy for the classroom teacher, and I took that folder and gave it to them so they knew anything and everything about the student. And they were able to put updates and evidence into the folder. And then hopefully I could collect it at the end of the year if the teacher didn't lose it. And now there were more than one cases where I went to get it and the teacher had no idea where it was, which told me they probably didn't use it very much that year. So we have that traditional, and I used that the first few years, but then I went to digital and I used a digital platform, which for me was much more effective. I didn't have to worry about it getting lost. I knew it could be interactive. I even shared it with the students and they were able to put things in specific folders and evidence of their learning as well. So whichever method you use, do what works best for you. But for me, I found that the digital platform was much more effective. So the goal of our portfolio is so that we exit the students at the right time and that we have that evidence that backs up our exit. We also have to have that body of evidence when we're questioning the access scores. So you can't just say, well, they were doing well in class. The access scores didn't give it the best picture. They made an A in reading, so I don't think the reading is valid. You can't do something like that. You have to have evidence. You have to bring things with you. You have to have gathered them ahead of time so that we have that available to make decisions. Whoops. So we also, when we're creating our portfolios, you have to have authentic work from the content areas. This is also something that can help improve instruction because it makes the teacher aware of what they need to be doing when they're gathering that evidence. And it is a shared responsibility between the EL teacher and the content teacher and the students. So everyone's involved. So what should be in your portfolios? Well, some standards that are aligned to ELD and the content, some multimedia productions or projects that the students have done, some student writing samples, some oral language artifacts, and any examples of growth. So those charts and things that we make to show that they're making growth. When I was in the classroom, I had my students make their own growth charts and we kept them in the folder and they would go in and mark off when they accomplished a goal. So it can be interactive in that way. There are some really cool snapshots is what they're called from WIDA that is a checklist. You can use these for gathering points if you wanted to use this as a point system to see how many points the students earned at each quarter. They are specific to the grade spans for the assessments, but a lot of people aren't aware that these are available. So I provided you with these link to these snapshots for your portfolios. Again, they come from WIDA and they're tied to the, I think, key language uses. Yes, they're tied to your key language uses. So those are available for you to have as part of your portfolios. And then one thing that I told you, I got a report of the state as a whole. And one thing that is consistently low from year to year is our speaking scores. This year, speaking and writing were both about the same. So our writing is also something of concern a little bit that we need to work on this year. But speaking is something we need to work on every year in every class. So I have an example here of something that was in a student portfolio and one of the resources that you can use to record. So I'm going to play a little bitty clip here of from Oscar. So let's see.
No puedo describir un desastre natural
So that was his prompt.
usando vocabulario apropiado. Tipos de desastres en el mundo: tornado, tsunami, terremoto, inundación, huracán. Palabras importantes para para el dibujo de tornado.
No, it's not parked
Espantos,
behind you.
aire, electricidad, calle, volar, lanzar, peligroso, cargar, carro, ciudad, cuidado, nubes, negro, etc. Su camino puede cargar muchas cosas. Entonces todo lo que venga en su camino, como estos árboles que vengan, se lo va a comer todo
Were you and Ty going or no?
a la vez y puede cargar como árboles, carros, pasto, etc. Muchas cosas más, como lo que venga en su camino. Se ve que hay una calle para acá, viendo algunos árboles. Y aquí hay las casas. Y se ve que las calles y las casas no tienen luz. Impactos impactos humano, humano, ambiente.
Okay, so the reason I share this is this student was speaking in Spanish, but he's still speaking and he's still practicing with a camera, with a microphone. He's comfortable. You can tell from what he's saying. It gives you an evaluation of what he learned from that lesson. Can easily be translated by the teacher. So it gives us, even though it's in Spanish, the student is practicing, and that will carry over when he is working in English. Oh, sorry. The tool that's being used was EduCreations, and it is free, and it allows the students to demonstrate their learning while they're talking. And so it has the visual along with the sound. On the left or on the right here, I also shared some other things that I've used over the years. Almost all of these are free to a degree. You can go so far with them for free, and then if you want to do more with them, it costs a little bit more. But initially, they're all free. Vocaroo I used all the time with my students. It's just a voice recording, but you can create QR codes with it. You can do all kinds of things, and it's unlimited. They can talk for as long as they want using Vocaroo, which was one of the things I liked about it. And one of the things we did with Vocaroo is the students would do a book talk and tell us about a book, and then we'd create a QR code that we put on the outside of the book, and the librarian in our school allowed us to put those on the library books so other students could come and scan and listen to that student do a book talk about the book. So there are all kinds of things that we can do that gets the students talking and working with a microphone, recording themselves, but give it a purpose and have it mean something to them. So that's just an example of how we can get them speaking as a result of looking at our test scores and seeing if their speaking score is low. That's something you could do about it as far as one of your goals. All right. So that gets me to IAPs or ILPs or whatever you call it in your district, and core instruction. So they have to work and mesh together. Your individual language plan helps ensure that they're at their level of language proficiency have a plan on how they're going to work through the core content, how they're going to interact in the classroom at the Tier 1 level. We want the students involved. We want them to participate in the class. So that's one of the goals we need to set through our IAP, or so your IAP is kind of your goal sheet here. And keeping in mind, as I showed in that video a moment ago, that their primary language is an asset. They can use it if it makes them comfortable and gets them talking, gets them involved. We're working towards English, but we still want them to strengthen their learning and keep moving forward as we learn the English. All teachers need to be language teachers. The content teachers, we need to help them understand how they can work with the students. But we have to work collaboratively and scaffold the lessons together. These are all resources that I've gathered and put together on different portfolios. The first link takes you to what I used when I went digital in the district I was in, and I'll walk you through some of that later. This one was developed by a school district, and it's just kind of how they're going to be doing portfolios. It gives you all the components that they're going to be looking at. So that's available. This one comes from somewhere in Canada. I think it's New Brunswick. But it gives you a starting point. They use this CEFR global scale, which is a European measurement, but it still correlates really well with any assessment. And that's kind of what they purport when they share it out, that you can use it with any assessments and to evaluate students. And it is pretty accurate. It's similar to our can-dos, but it allows you to make a student profile. I like this one too. So it goes along with the chart above, and the student, sorry for scrolling, the student can check off what level they are in listening, speaking, conversing, and writing. So there's that. And then it goes into secondary, some class planning. And so you could create something similar to this with the standards and everything that we have in Missouri. And then this one is from another series that kind of talks you through the different types of evaluations for oral language, for reading, for listening and speaking. And it gives you some examples of the evaluation process and things that you might want to include in your portfolio. And I believe there's a portfolio at the end, yes. So that gives you another tool to look at if you're interested. And reclassification form is just kind of a very simple goal sheet when you're getting ready for reclassification, to give information about the student. So talking about portfolio and access, this is kind of your page to put in the student's file on what you used for reclassification and how you evaluated the student. So there's that. This one's kind of cool to use with your students for setting goals. So for reading, writing, speaking, and listening, they can circle where they are now, and their goal is going to increase access reading score to a certain point by doing this skill. So you can have more than one of these throughout the year. As they meet that goal, you can get a new sheet and put in their folder with a new goal. So that's available for you. This next one is a teams form. So it talks about how you can work as a team and gives you some ideas for how you collaborate. The individual plan is just that. So this kind of sets goals, gives you an example of what this district used for theirs. And then this one is an ILP that was adopted and used by, it's from Kansas, but it was adopted and used by some other schools in our state. So there's a blank, and then I also put a completed sample. I think this one's one already filled in, yes. So it gives you an idea of what goals you could put there and what it might look like. And then the last thing here is a kind of an evaluation of your students as a whole, the progress over time. So you can put in the year and how many students and each level you have, trend data, whether they're meeting goals, and then any emphasis area that you wanted to include and how they're doing as far as how many students are in each level. And then students who are in a bilingual, ESL bilingual or migrant program, and what their scores look like, and what percent are at each level, and then what goals you can set as a district or as a school to meet the needs. So this is more for the teachers planning, setting goals for the EL program. Anyway, so there's that form for you. And St. Louis Public Schools uses this, and I think this is one that's been filled in to give you an example of what that might look like. So there's that example for you for some portfolio resources. Also, when we're talking about English learners who have disabilities, they can also be exited using portfolios. So in our new document that I was talking about earlier, that identifying, supporting, and reclassifying English learners with disabilities, on pages 25, excuse me, through 27, it talks about how you can reclassify them in the same manner that we do other students with a portfolio, collecting evidence. We're looking at how they're performing in comparison to like peers. So students who have the same disabilities as them, who are English learners. So if they're performing at the same level as an English speaker, then we would say that they have met their goal of being English proficient, and we could exit them with evidence that's been collected to demonstrate that. So that's found in that document, and you can read more about it there. So the rest of this we've shared once before, or more than once before. Charting your information is to help set your growth goals and looking at your students. So again, there's the goal sheet. This one I created that computes it for you. This one's completed, but there's a chart for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and on. So when you put in the scores, it's going to automatically compute whether they have made growth or not. So that's available. The thing about this, the reason there are a copy of kindergarten and kindergarten, so each year at the end of the year, rather than recreate all of this data, I take 12th off and I change 11th to 12th on down. So kindergarten becomes first. And then this copy of kindergarten, I make a copy of that and put it for kindergarten, and I have a new kindergarten class. So I don't have to recreate it every year. The information just shifts with the students as they progress. So it's kind of a nice chart that I thought I would share.
Question real quick.
Sure.
On that Google sheet, do you have a separate file for each language domain, or do you just do it with the overall?
This I've just computed with overall because it was for evaluating growth. So I used it mostly for calculating my growth index for the EL indicator.
Okay.
So that I can know as a school who in my class or who in my district is showing growth.
Okay.
I also I don't know if you notice, I color coded my charts to know, like blue is newcomers on my chart and the pink are SPED students. So it gives me a visual picture. This is really good for like if you're talking to the school Board of Education and you're showing them where your students are and what progress you're making, because sometimes they don't see the full picture of where your students are, that some have only been here 1 year, but these kids are all in the same class. So it gives that visual picture of This is why all of them aren't exiting right now, because they've only been here for a year. So it's just a good data tracking for the progress towards proficiency that we have to report annually.
So we could use it for the overall scale score or a domain scale score if we
Yes, it
wanted
gives
to
you
track
both.
like writing, for example.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
So it
thank
gives you a
you.
good picture of whether your students' growth towards proficiency and whether they're getting close to needing to exit. And it's pretty easy to just, if you have it on a sheet and you keep it in the same order, you can cut and paste them into theirs, and then it'll populate. The only thing you have to put in manually would be the goal. So that's what this green chart is. But this, like, for example, would be a fourth grade class. So I know everyone's going to be somewhere in this level here. So I look at what their previous was based on this chart, and it's really easy to put them in. That makes sense?
Cami, can I follow up on that just real quick?
Sure.
So I heard you say that we could use the green chart for all 4 domains. Has the, I guess, calculation altered at all? Like I remember like years ago when Ryan showed this, and
Yes.
it was really based on like the 4.7 being the cross point on the box plot of which kids actually score proficient on the map.
Right.
So at that time, at least, the message was don't use it for domain scores. It's composite score only. But I just want to make sure I'm lining up with what you're saying now. Desi is saying it is okay to use those same goals for individual domains.
This is the composite score on this
Right.
chart.
Right. But I think maybe I misunderstood the question that because that was something that's always come up when I share this. People say, well, how do we set a goal for individual domains? I say, well, the green chart's really just the composite goal.
Right.
But are you saying it's okay to use that same scale for, say, setting a goal of growth in writing or speaking?
I think when it comes to that, it'll be more, there's another chart here. Oops, sorry. I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's not going to hurt things for you to use it. It's going to give you a general idea. It's
Okay.
designed for an overall score, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still going to give you a picture of where your students are.
Sure. Okay. And
But when the state looks at your data, we're only looking at the overall.
overall,
Yeah.
so they're just using it for that. Okay. And have we made any additional steps towards a scale score growth goal at the state level, or is that still in the works?
I have discussed that with the Office of Quality Schools, and I gave them a proposal of how I felt that we'd be better serving our students to use a scale score calculation. I gave them an example of what's used in other states. So they're looking at it.
Okay.
But I don't know that we're the most important thing on their list of things to do.
Okay.
But they did entertain my proposal, and they said that they would look at it, and they definitely knew that there was some work they need to do with regards to our English learners and how we calculate things. So they were very receptive and listened and supportive. So maybe things will happen. So we'll see.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to derail that at all or anything.
That's fine, no problem.
Do they understand though that even though the kids are taking the same test in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, they're scored on it harder, so they don't show the composite score growth the state is telling them they need to show.
Yes.
If they were scored the same way, they would definitely be showing composite score growth.
Yes.
But even though it's the same test,
right,
because it makes me insane when I see the composite score maybe changes by a 10th,
right,
but the scale score changes by a ton.
Yes. And that was one of the things I took to them when I said, I said, this is not an accurate depiction of where our students are and how they're progressing. I said, it would make so much more sense to do it another way. Like I said, at least they listened to me, and they said that they would look at it, and they were very open to using the scale score. So hopefully we can get something going. But it's in their hands. It's been delivered. We'll see what happens.
Tammy,
Yes,
2 questions.
certainly.
That 4.7 is years ago. When you were looking at the scale score piece, did you look to see if that had changed any in 7 years?
Yes, I did. I actually looked and made a comparison between the 2 years, and our scores have not changed very much at all. So they're pretty consistent of where they were, which is in a sense concerning as well. But knowing that we're hitting a moving target and it's a new group of students coming in, I can understand why it hasn't changed a lot. But in some instances, it does give me pause as to how some of our school districts are performing, because we had a lot of schools still showing zero growth, which upsets me a little bit. We
Yeah.
should have some growth. But that's why we're doing things like what we're doing here today, talking about setting goals for our students. Yes. So that's kind of the purpose.
Second question.
Sure.
Most of my colleagues I talk with feel like an average monolingual English speaker would struggle to get a 4.7.
I know.
Has there been any more talk from WIDA about norming the test against monolingual English speakers?
We bring that up every meeting. And they said that the norming table didn't support that it wouldn't give us an accurate picture, and that the purpose is English learner progress. And so anyway, they had a big spiel on why they wouldn't give it to an English speaker, but they did agree that a lot of our English speakers probably wouldn't do well on it as well.
So we're holding kids in ELD services beyond the need.
Well, and last month's
portfolios.
Yeah.
Portfolio out.
Last month's check-in kind of addressed that. So there is a national study being done by Wested where they're looking at what our expectations are, and maybe our expectations are set too high for some students. So they are looking at that and they're investigating it. Mostly their concern is why, well, and I shared last month, the students who are at the upper grades number are increasing, and the students we have enrolled in the lower grades have decreased as a nation. So we have fewer ELs in the lower grades than the increase has declined in the lower grades, but the a number of students in the upper grades has increased. And when they did that research, they found it wasn't because more ELs are coming in the upper grades. It's because more students are staying in the program. Wow. And they're not exiting. So they said in any group that they studied, at least 25% in each group were staying in the program as long-term English learners. And so they're concerned with that and trying to figure out why. What are the reasons that they are being retained in the program for so long? And one of the things they looked at is maybe our standards are too high. Maybe our scores expectations are too high. So yes, they are looking at it, but WIDA themselves, maybe not.
I think sorry, this is going to sound really awful, but I think there's a couple of reasons why it happens that way. One, I think WIDA acts more as a corporation instead of an actual educational entity. And they figure if we score harder, more kids have to take it, which means we charge the districts and states more. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of that, I know some of the kids that are still in the program in my district, they've been here since birth. I had them when they were in kindergarten, and they still test on a level that qualifies them to be in the program, because even when they could have tested out in elementary school, they intentionally didn't, because they felt like they could use it as a crutch
Right.
to get what they wanted instead. And that to me is making me crazy at this point, because I have so many newcomers that have only been here since maybe 8th grade, others since 4 months ago. And I want to be able to focus on those students, not my LTELs.
Well, and you know, it's up to your district how you work with those students. So, you know, and that comes in with your portfolios too. I mean, if they're showing progress in the classroom, that gives you reason to dispute the access score.
It does, because I've had one of my seniors who graduated last year, he scored a 1.9 tier A.
Oh my.
And he's been here since birth.
Oh my.
And so, you know how irate that made me. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't go on my grades. And I'm like, but colleges can see that, and you'll have to take the TOEFL to even get accepted.
Yes.
But it's just getting them to understand the purpose of it.
Yes.
And not take advantage of the service.
Yes. And that's why last year I was really trying to push to work more with counselors, because counselors need to have those types of discussions with students when they're doing their ICAP, when they're planning their pathway to graduation, so that they understand the ramifications of some of those things. So yes, I agree with you 100%.
That's one thing too that I would love for the state to actually enforce, instead of just saying it's a recommendation, but mandatory PD for administrators and counselors, so that they understand what the ELD teachers are dealing with every single day.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, I've been trying to push myself into those administrator meetings and those counselor meetings. They did, like I said, they did let me go to the counselors conference this last year. So we're trying, but I'm one person. So
yes, you definitely need a team with you instead of
that's
running
true.
solo.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so I'm going to go on. Again, we're just talking about meeting our growth goals in this part, working towards proficiency. And this page, I've shared this before. This tells you how we calculate growth for our EL indicator. So this poor student didn't quite make it. Then I provided here the updated charts from WIDA that show the growth for year that you can plot it on. So these are all the newest that we have based on last year's scores. So you can utilize those if you wish. And that looks something like this. So you can use this digitally and put these in on a computer. You can handwrite them in, but this is a great tool to use when you're talking to like administrators, and just when you're looking at your students and who's making growth and who's not. This is something you could use for each domain, because I think this is what I was getting at a while ago when I was talking about the different domains. You can create one of these charts for each domain, because on the WIDA site, it gives you the growth for domain domain. So you could utilize these charts for one for listening, one for speaking, if you wanted to. It doesn't just have to be the overall in this case. So this is a great tool to use to see how they're growing in the different domains. And another thing, you can look at the median here, and it gives you an automatic picture of who's above that 50th percentile and who's not. So this one little straggler here, we know that this student's needing some extra help to find out what's going on with him. Is he just making marks on the test and not putting forth effort? And we need to have a conversation with that student. So it's a nice way to, again, look at your data and try to use it. This is what I was sharing a while ago. I created the digital portfolio for my students in my district, and I've provided you with access to all of that. After I finish those charts, like in second grade's folder, I would put a copy of that so that I have it for all of my students. And I'm going to go back here. This is what the folder looks like for portfolios. I have one for each grade. And kind of like that other chart, each year I just changed the outside folder grade level so that they move up with the students. And if I were a student, this is kind of what my folder would look like. This is my whole educational career from kindergarten through 12th grade. All of my students made a video of themselves saying their name and if they know what they know about making or what they know about where their name came from, so that teachers, when I share this folder, they get to hear the student's name and they can practice it and they'll say it correctly, which is very important. I also put a culturegram that identifies the country the student's from, that talks a little bit about some cultural aspects that we might not be aware of for that student. So that's in the folder. In the main folder, let me go back a little bit here. So this is my main folder. I had a whole folder that, and you have access to this, culturegrams from all of the countries that were in my school district. And then these were a study done by Rhode Island College where they did a culture study of each of the countries that they represented. So they're very well done. So that's there. I say can-dos are there. These are those growth charts. These are IAP examples. So these I collected from all different states and places. These are what I linked to in the document today. And then I had a folder just with information for teachers. So there are all kinds of WIDA documents and helps for them, classroom teachers on retention and grading. And I shared this folder with my portfolios when it went out to teachers. So this is all there. You can dig through, use what you want, or don't use any of it if you want. So, but that's available for you if you're interested. And then I said before, the reason we want to use scale scores instead of grade level proficiency, kind of like what you were saying, if we had a 10th grader that moved to 11th grade and in both years he got a 3.5, you would say, well, he didn't make any growth. But if we looked at his scale score, he made some growth. So he's still moving forward. It wasn't great growth, but he's not stagnant and he's still moving. We have to decide if it's significant enough. This is kind of good to share with students as well. I had this posted on my wall in my classroom as a goal. So whatever grade they were in, this is the scale score that they're striving for from where they are now to get to a 4.7. So if they're in third grade and they have a 340, they know they need 22 points to get to that 4.7. And so we talked as a class and with my students individually, how we're going to earn those extra 22 points. So they were driven to excel and exceed, and we celebrated their successes as we achieved goals towards improving every day. So making them own part of the progress that they're making, I think, is very, very helpful. This tells you at each proficiency level what the lowest score until we get to the next level is. And there's a full table of that provided from WIDA. And then this comes from something Ryan did several years ago. When you're plotting your information, you don't just look at your access scores. You also need to look at MAP scores, where they are there, benchmark scores, and you can rate your portfolio with something like that WIDA checklist that I shared and have a score for that as well. And then when you look at your student, you're going to say, did they make access growth? Did they meet their performance level for MAP? This whole picture gives you an idea where the student is and could be part of their portfolio as well. So you could make a chart similar to this to put in there. And then Ryan shared all of these different scenarios with students and gave all of the information. So this is something that you could have as part of your portfolio. Have the demographic picture of your student, where they're from, what languages their parents speak, their educational history. So this is something that I think would be very important to be included in a portfolio. And then each student's scores, and then making that determination for each one. All right. The most important thing, though, is moving from intuition to deliberation when we're talking about our data. So our job as decision makers isn't always to be right, but to make the best decision in each instance. Being deliberate, using the data and the evidence increases the odds that we're going to make a good decision for our students. But just like our weatherman, we aren't always successful. And we know that weathermen use the best science available to them. They use years of knowledge. They have all kinds of things they draw from, but they still don't always make the best decision or the best guess on success. So we need to keep those types of things in mind when we're thinking about working with our students. A lot of times we focus on the data-based decision-making and gathering our data and having it on paper, but we don't implement it. And that's my challenge for you this year, is to take all of that data that you gather and those decisions you make, but then implement them. Set goals with your students, work towards goals, celebrate the goals, and try to make progress. Make the students accountable for making progress and helping you to set goals and make those decisions. And then remembering that even if the decision is good or bad, it's how it's implemented that determines how successful it's going to be. And we have 3 ways that we can help move from intuition to deliberation. The first one is making sure we use the data and evidence and that it's guided by decision rules. So I like this picture. We have this Uber driver who says he was following the app and this is what it told him to do. But was that the best decision? So sometimes the data that we get, the rules that we set, don't always give us the best outcome. We have to take into consideration the individual circumstances, the individual students, and sometimes we have to alter our plans a little bit to make them fit the situation that we're in so that we don't end up stranded on the stairs. So improving our decision-making, making sure that we think about all of our options. And then scheduling time for database decision making as a team. So deliberation takes time, but if you're rushed, a lot of times when you rush, you rely more on your intuition than on the facts and on the data. And you have less time to talk about it with someone. When you talk things out with someone, you make better decisions most often. Not always, but most often. So time is something we need to build into our schedules, whether it's one time a week that you get to meet with somebody or something, but being deliberate about taking the time to have a good discussion and set some goals. And then the last one is training and supporting your team on how to use the data. We need to talk about the why, the how, and the what. Why do we use the data that we do? Why is it important that we look at MAP scores and our interim assessments? How are we using that? And how are we conducting our meetings to talk about that? And then what are we going to be using is really important. So deciding on the what's. Not to forget, using this whole form, not just the overall score for placement, but looking at the listening by itself, the speaking, the reading, and the writing, seeing where our students are and what their needs are, setting goals for each of these areas. So if I looked at the first student, I see he has a 6 in listening, a 6 in reading, but he has a 3 in writing and a 2.6 in speaking. So even though his overall proficiency is a 2.9, this kid has a lot going for him. I need to give him practice in speaking and if your speaking improves, your writing is going to also improve, because the more you use your oral language and develop your speaking skills, the better your writing is going to be. So thinking about things like that when we set goals for our students is going to increase performance overall. So breaking it down and setting those goals based on our data that we have, rather than just looking at our overall score. That's my challenge. So we need to use our informed data decision making. That's part of the whole thing I was talking about earlier with our EL indicator. That's part of our ESSA plan, is to increase the percentage of English learners who are showing progress and achieving proficiency. We're looking at how well they perform in each proficiency level compared to other students in Missouri. We're looking at whether they meet the expectations or not. And then if they don't, we look at why are they not. And we're also looking at how well all teachers are trained to work with English learners, and the role of the EL specialist, how they're utilized in the schools. So if we're not showing game, those are some areas that we look into. We also look at the type of program and whether it's effective or not. So maybe there needs to be a change in the program in order for the students to show progress. And are we setting goals? Setting goals motivates educators. It helps the students understand what they need to do and is motivating for them. And it helps educators think about the path that the students need to get through the program and exit. And this is one of the big whys for me. Some educators think that ELs are a big problem and they wish they would just go away. We have some educators that see them as special resources for our country. Businesses really see them as something that is going to benefit our country because they need bilingual and multilingual employees that are able to speak to the people they're working with in their companies. Another statistic that I found was very interesting in one of the workshops that I attended recently was that baby boomers are outnumbering our current generation. And as the baby boomers are retiring, we don't have enough people to fill their places. And if we're not training our English learners properly and not giving them the education they need, we may be in a world of hurt down the road because we won't have enough people to fill the jobs that we currently need. So we have to respond to the students' unmet needs and make sure that we're providing them with an equitable access to quality education. And as many will tell you, that ELs are the key to our future. We need them, and it is a matter of national importance. That's our why. That's the end of what I had to share. I'll get off my soapbox a little bit. Any of this information, if you need more help with it, you can talk to your male specialist. They're always there to help you. I'm always there to help, just an email away. This will be on the hub with the recording and the slides. And as always, you can contact me anytime. Give me a phone call or send me an email. I'm happy to help as best I can. And that is the end of my presentation for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have any questions or concerns that you'd like to share, I'll entertain some now, and then I'll turn off the camera if you want to ask some off camera. So if I don't get any questions real quick, then I'll just turn off the camera and you can ask them.
So I have one that I'd like to ask, and this is what I emailed you about. I'm interested in knowing from other districts what you're doing with the alternate access scores, because the information that I read from WIDA says that you can't compare 2024 scores to previous year scores. And one of the things that we do is look for, I guess, stagnant scores, for lack of a better term, or like when students, there's no change in growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if any other districts had a plan that they could share about what they're planning to do so that students don't have to start over in terms of showing that they've kind of maxed out at their language ability.
Hopefully, WIDA is doing this study on the ELD assessment and gathering data and information on it. So hopefully they'll have something to share on down the road.
But for this year, too bad. Like, it just feels pretty icky to tell people that, but
I think they're working on some sort of crosswalk between them. So let me get back with you on that, because I know I'm on one of the committees with WIDA that we're talking about assessment. I can pose that question to them and see if they have a response, and then I'll get back with you on that.
okay. So far they just keep saying ask your state, which I have a lot of thoughts
Well,
about that,
and we
but
don't have an EL assessment person anymore, and that's not
Yeah.
my wheelhouse. So we'll find out.
Erin,
I'll
I
talk
don't
with Sean about it.
I don't know if this is, I was thrilled to hear your question because we don't have like a set process for that, but an idea, this may be a bad one, that our special services director and I had was just to sit down and you know how you can actually pull up the item spec of, okay, on this question, this is what they got. On this question, this is what they got. I have not looked at it yet, but I was just like wondering, maybe that's a possibility that we could at least start to look at growth of, you got this many questions right at this proficiency level. I need to, and maybe somebody can correct me if that's not going to work out. Like, think about, does it play out that way on the access? But I know on the traditional test, in the massive CSV file we get, what I end up giving to my teachers, I take all that stuff out, but that could potentially be useful. And if you have
Okay.
a really high number of kids taking the alternate test, that's probably not feasible. We don't. So I don't know.
Yeah, this is my first year looking at alternate access scores, so that is helpful. I'll look and see if that's something that would make sense for the scores this year or not.
Like I said, I haven't tried it yet, so it might
Yeah.
end up being a terrible idea, but it was a thought. Cami, I don't know if you saw my question in the chat.
I was just reading.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I want to make sure that I was thinking that correctly.
So about proficient on this access and on portfolio, we look at, well, that's why we have a place on your core data reporting. You can say exit by portfolio or exit by an assessment. So when we report that data, we do take those into account as well.
Okay.
So they're reported as proficient.
Okay. But if we have exited a student by, say, portfolio, does DESE separate that as far as looking for the increase in percent of students, just because there's some subjectivity to that? I didn't know if DESE was just looking squarely at how many kids scored 4.7.
I think we're just looking at how many students exit. So if you've exited them by portfolio, they'll go into the same category as students who are exited. Okay. As far as the numbers on our indicator, that wouldn't calculate there. But when we report overall proficiency, we look at them as two separate things. So, but they are acknowledged that they were listed as proficient, but they're not included in the EL indicator because it doesn't the 4.7.
Yep. That makes sense.
Cami, one of the things that I'm seeing, I put in a comment earlier, we are feeling like our tier 1 curriculum, and we just went to a new curriculum a couple years ago, it doesn't have expectations that lead to access at all. Like massively different writing expectations for grade level writing compared to what WIDA writing requires. So ELD instruction isn't really giving access to the curriculum, it's giving access to exit.
So is your curriculum locally higher or
Much lower,
lower expectation?
especially in writing.
Uh-huh.
Does anyone else feel that? Like kids need to write paragraphs by upper elementary for WIDA, but not at all in the classroom.
I don't
We
know
may
how
be
does
alone
that.
in it. And we're with CKLA Amplify, which is much more about building background knowledge. So it's much more on the comprehension side, not necessarily as much on production.
How is it correlating with the state standards for writing?
Don't know that it, I think we have focused more on reading.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my question. So do our standards correlate more? I think when I looked at them, our WIDA standards correlated more with our state standards. So I'm wondering if your program is not meeting the goals of our state standards.
But
That
we
would be
don't
my
test
that would be
writing.
my first look, is how closely are your goals with that program aligning with our state standards.
And I think we don't test writing very much.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it's not tested, it's not taught.
Yeah. Right. Well,
Thank
kind
you.
of like speaking, right?
Yes.
I'll kind of piggyback off of you, Lynn. So at my school, we have done a writing diagnostic in the past and like gathered data, like looking specifically at writing. But it was just again one of those like touch points that we like looked at and then never really taught to. So this year I went through and I made a whole new writing diagnostic, but I'm kind of falling in the same boat that you are with like access doesn't prepare kids for like real life writing that they're doing. Um, so just to kind of piggyback and let you know that we're kind of seeing the same thing. So like I created a writing diagnostic for first graders and second graders that aligns to kind of what Access wants them to be doing with writing, but then it doesn't align with like what our curriculum is asking kids to write. So it's like trying to find a middle ground, and then it's even harder. So like I tried to make one for third and fourth grade. Well, in third and fourth grade, they're asking kids to write 3 to 5 paragraph essays, not like what WIDA asks them to do, so just it's hard to kind of like get a good data point in that area of writing when we've kind of talked about this, when WIDA like is not really treating it as like a curriculum, like they're using it for different reasons.
So that may be a good thing if you go back to that survey. That might be a good point to bring up in that survey. And if you attend the writing workshop, you would have the ear of someone from WIDA that you can ask questions of about writing. Shameless plug for our PD.
Yes, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Now, part of what I want to say about writing is it's not writing as part of an ELA program that we're promoting. It's writing as it relates to language and the use of language. So I don't know if that makes a difference, or if I'm sure that's probably what their comment would be. Writing as part of language development, not so much as the writing process. So I don't know what the difference is. And I haven't seen an assessment lately to it's been 6 years since I've given one.
I'm glad you brought that up because that makes me kind of start thinking more all around the lines of like, I want to gather their like language acquisition and writing, not so much like what can they do on a test.
Right.
So thank you for that. Kind of getting my brain thinking a little more about it.
Any other questions for the group before I turn off the recording? All right, I'm going to stop the recording if I can find the button.